एतदेव अन्यचिन्ता निन्दया दृढयति क इति ताम् यथाभूतां परस्य हरे अनुचिन्तां धारणाम् अनादृत्य पशु कर्मजनान् विना कर्मजनान् gross materialists. Even the karmakandis are considered to be gross materialists, karmis. Yatha Pashureva Yamsa Devanam iti Shrute. The Shruti says that uh, the human being, the pious human being, is considered like an animal before the Devas, an animal for the Devas, a sacrificial animal for the Devas. Asatyam Vishya Chintam Ko Nama Kuryat Taya Chintaya Vaitaranyam Patitam Tatra Cha Swakarmajan Adhyatmika Adi Kleshan Sevam Anam Janam Pashyan. As a consequence of fallen in the river of suffering, as a consequence of accruing the result of their own work. The river of suffering, suffering here refers to the threefold miseries. Adhyatmika, Adhidaivika, Adhibhautika miseries. Vaitarani Yamasya Dwarastha Nadi. The Tulyatvat Samsritir Vaitarani. Vaitarani actually refers to the river that flows by the door of Yamaraj. The flow of material existence is also called Vaitarani because it is comparable to that. Vyatirekena tad eva dradayati. The current verse indirectly reinforces what was stated before by criticizing other thought processes, other attempts. Tam prasiddham bhakti manaditya. Who will neglect such transcendental thought refers to neglecting the well-known process of Bhagavad Bhakti, Krishna Bhakti. In the Vedas, it is said that persons who are attached to demigods to the exclusion of the Supreme Personality of Godhead are like the animals who follow the herdsmen, even though they are taken to the slaughterhouse. Pashureva Yamsadevana. The materialists, like animals, also do not know how they are being misdirected by neglecting the transcendental thought of the Supreme Person. No one can remain vacant of thought. It is said that an idle brain is a devil's workshop because a person who cannot think in the right way must think of something which may bring about disaster. The materialists are always worshipping some minor demigods, although this is condemned in the Bhagavad Gita 7.20. As long as a person is illusioned by material gains, he petitions the respective demigods to draw some particular benefit, which is after all illusory and non-permanent. The enlightened transcendentalist is not captivated by such illusory things. Therefore, he is always absorbed in the transcendental thought of the Supreme in different stages of realization, namely Brahman, Paramatma, and Bhagavan. In the previous verse, it is suggested that one should think of the Super Soul, which is one step higher than the impersonal thought of Brahman, as it was suggested in the case of contemplating the Virat Rupa of the personality of Godhead. Intelligent persons who can see properly and look into the general conditions of the living entities who are wandering in the cycle of 8,400,000 species of life, as well as in different classes of human beings. It is said that there is an everlasting belt of water called the river Vaitarani at the entrance of the Platonic planet of Yamaraj, who punishes sinners in different manners. After being subjected to such sufferings, a sinner is awarded a particular species of life according to his deeds in the past. Such living entities as are punished by Yamaraj are seen in different varieties of conditioned life. Some of them are in heaven and some of them are in hell. Some of them are brahmanas and some of them are misers, kripanas. But no one is happy in this material world, and all of them are either class A, B, or C prisoners suffering because of their own deeds. The Lord is impartial to all circumstances of the sufferings of the living entities. But to one who takes shelter at his lotus feet, the Lord gives proper protection and he takes such a living entity back home, back to himself. Text 8. केचित् स्वदेहान्तर्हृदयावकाशे प्रादेशमात्रं पुरुषं वसन्तं चतुर्भुजं कञ्जरथाङ्गशङ्ख गदाधरं धारणया स्मरन्ति. Others conceive of the personality of God residing within the body, in the region of the heart, and measuring only 8 inches, with 4 hands, carrying a lotus, a wheel of a chariot, a conch shell, and a club, respectively. Tameva dharanam sa visheshanam aha. So this method of concentrating on the super soul, Paramatma, is presented with details in the current verse, in 6 verses beginning with the current verse. Echiditi shadvihi. Swadehasya antarmadhye tadhritayam. Hridaya parimanam tatra upachariyate. Measuring only 8 inches. This refers to the dimensions or size measurement of the heart. So this is an upachara. This is measuring only 8 inches is a metaphorical description. It's not that the super soul is actually only 8 inches, but this is a method of meditation. Chaitanya Mata Manjusha has got an interesting point. Kechit ityadina udaharana darshanena na kevalam namanyeva kirtaye dhyayecha. The current verse is an indication that through this illustration, through this example, it is pointed out that one should not just chant the holy names, but one should also meditate on the Lord. Pradesha matra. Oh, nice explanation. Prakrishna adesha agya pradesha vedaha. Saiva matra pramanam yasya. Pradesha matram means the one who, the source of knowledge of whom is only the Vedas, which is the perfect form of commandment. All of us can work out different types of commandments. We can issue commandments, but that form of commandment, which is given by the Supreme Personality of Godhead through the Vedas, that is perfect. Etat chaturbhuja dhyanam mumukshuparam. This meditation of the four-armed form, that is for those who seek liberation. Vakshyati cha ekadeshe. This will be stated in the 11th canto, 11.46. अथ तत्रापि एकदेशिनां मतं आह. This is the opinion of some practitioners. In 4.5 verses, there is a description of dharana of the individual super soul. That form of dharana of the collective super soul, Garbhodakashayi Vishnu, that is in line with what will be presented in the 3rd canto. This should be understood. That is indicated in text 39 of the 1st chapter of 2nd canto. Paramatma Sandarbha Srila Jiva Goswami also refers to this form of meditation and the measurement as being of the size of the heart by referring to Vedanta Sutra 1.3.25. Hridyapekshaya manushya adhikaratvat. This is because human beings have a heart of this size. I thought there is some question in chat box. When one is punished already in hell, then how they decide which species a living entity and has to enter? Oh, this will come in third canto, fifth canto, corresponding to the sins committed by that particular sinful living entity. He is given a particular type of punishment and a particular species. There's a lot of discussion about this in various Puranas. What is the exact process? After the living entity leaves the body, what exactly happens? We will see that in third canto, we'll come across it. In fifth canto also, we'll come across it. How again he travels to heaven or hell, again comes back, is different. If one is engaged in pious activities, he goes up. He is engaged in sinful activities, he goes down. If he goes down, first he is punished in Naraka, which is a subtle environment. Then afterwards, he is put in a particular body of the lower species, after which he goes through regularly one species after another. There's a whole queue. He goes through that entire queue, one particular body, then another body, another one, and finally comes to human body. कृष्णाचक्रवर्ती ठाकुर एवं च वैराग्यं भक्तेर अन्वय व्यतिरेकौ च प्रदर्श्य पुनरपि योगिनां पूर्वोक्त धारणातः अपि अतिश्रैष्ठ्यम् अंतर्यामिनः चिद्घन रूपस्य धारणामाह केचित्. Having pointed out the renunciation and detachment, as well as a direct and indirect presentation of bhakti, once again, he talks about that form of dharana, of the concentrated spiritual form of the antaryami, the super soul, which is far superior to the dharana that was described in the previous chapter. All of this is for the yogis. Vakshimana Vakyanusarin Vairajya Dharana Abhyasena Shuddhachitta Evam Tadantaryaminaschid Ghana Rupasya Dharyuhu Iti Abhiprayena Hakechid. An alternative meaning of this is that when one engages in the process of meditation on the Virat Rupa, one's heart becomes pure. And then he engages in concentrated meditation on the fully spiritual form of the super soul, in line with the statements that we will come across now. Sukadeva Goswami is going to speak about them. So some of them follow this pathway. Atra dharanayam chaturvidha yoginaha sambhavanti. There are four possible kinds of yogis who can engage in this kind of dharana. Tatra prathamaha bhagavad rupam an alamba manaha pranam mano dharanavantaha Sri Bhagavata asamata vigitaya. Without taking shelter of the form of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, there are those who engage in dharana of the prana and manas. They are criticized. They are not approved. That form of dharana is not approved by Sri Bhagavatam. Dvitiya, second type. Purvokta Vairajya Dharanaya Shuddha Chittaha Mrinala Gaura Yatashesha Bhoga Ityadi Tatiya Skandokta Tat Antaryami Chaturbhuja Rupa Dharanavantaha. Those who have become pure in mind after engaging in the form of meditation on the Virat Rupa as described in the previous chapter, and then they engage in meditation on the four-armed super soul described in the third canto, in the texts, in the section that begins with 3.8.23. Tiyaha, Vairaja Dharana Nantara Vyashti Virat Antaryami Chaturbuja Rupa Dharanavantaha. The third type is, after engaging in meditation on the Virat Rupa, they engage in meditation on the collective super soul of Virat, of the universal form. This is also four-armed form. Chaturthaha Svateva Shuddha Chitta. The fourth are those yogis who are by themselves pure in heart. Prathamata eva vyashti antaryama chaturbuja dharanavanta eva atra kechit shabdena uchyante. Right at the beginning, it is this third type, those who are engaged in meditation on the four-armed super soul. No, that Vyashti Virat is individual Virat. The third type is actually not the collective super soul, it is the individual super soul, which means for each universe there is a super soul. So they're meditating on him. This is that. The word Kechit refers to that. Pradesha matram iti pradesha pramana hridaye dhyayatvat. Pradesha matram, where is that? Hridaye vasant, purusham vasant. Pradesha matram, measuring only 8 inches. This is because that is how he is meant to be meditated upon. He is meant to be meditated upon as being present inside the heart, which measures 8 inches. Purusham, tavan matram iti pradeshopya achintya shakya panchadasha varshiya purushakara pramana. Even then, by his inconceivable potency, he has the form of a 15-year-old person. Santam Vayasi Kaishore, because that is noted in 3.28.17. Vasantam, Tatra, Antar. Yeah, Putavasam is residing. Vasantam is residing as the super soul, Antaryami. The all-pervading personality of God resides as Paramatma in the heart of each and every living entity. The measurement of the localized personality of God is estimated to expand from the end of the ring finger to the end of the thumb, more or less 8 inches. The form of the Lord described in this verse with distribution of different symbols, beginning from the lower right hand up and down to the lower left hand, where the lotus wheel of a chariot, conch shell, and club, respectively, is called Janardana, or the plenary portion of the Lord who controls the general mass of people. There are many such forms of the Lord with varied situations of symbols of lotus, conch shell, etc., differently known as Purushottama, Achyuta, Nrsimha, Trivikrama, Rishikesha, Keshava, Madhava, Aniruddha, Pradyumna, Sankarshana, Sridhara, Vasudeva, Damodara, Janardana, Narayana, Hari, Padmanabha, Vamana, Vasudana, Govinda, Krishna, Vishnumurti, Adhokshaja, and Upendra. These 24 forms of the localized personality of Godhead are worshipped in different parts of this planetary system. And each form is an incarnation of the Lord having a different Vaikuntha planet in the spiritual sky, which is called the Paravyoma. There are many millions of other forms of the Lord, and each and every one of them has a particular planet in the spiritual sky, of which this material sky is only a fragmental offshoot. The Lord exists as Purusha, or the male enjoyer, although there is no comparing him to any male form in the material world. But all such forms are Advaita, non-different from one another, and each of them is eternally young. The young Lord with 4 hands is nicely decorated as described below. It's 9. Prasanna Vaktam Nalinaya Tekshanam Kadamba Kinjalka Pishanga Vasasam Lasan Maharatna Hiranmayangadam Spuran Maharatna Kirita Kundalam. His mouth expresses his happiness. His eyes spread like the petals of a lotus, and his garments, yellowish like the saffron of a kadamba flower, are bedecked with valuable jewels. His ornaments are all made of gold, set with jewels. and he wears a glowing headdress and earrings. उन्निद्रहृत्पङ्कजकर्णिकालये योगेश्वरास्थापितपादपल्लवम् श्रीलक्षणं कौस्तुभरत्नकन्धरम् अम्लानलक्ष्म्या वनमालयाचितम्. His lotus feet are placed over the worlds of the lotus-like hearts of great mystics. On his chest is the Kaustubha jewel engraved with the beautiful calf, and there are other jewels on his shoulders. His complete torso is garlanded with fresh flowers. तद्भक्तानि योगेश्वरान् अपि ध्यायेत् इति भावः. His lotus feet are placed over the worlds of the lotus-like hearts of great mystics, indicates that uh, um, that one should meditate also on his devotees, who are the best of the yogis, who are masters of the yoga system. The ornaments, flowers, clothing, and all the other decorations on the transcendental body of the personality of Godhead are identical with the body of the Lord. None of them are made of material ingredients. Otherwise, there would be no chance of their decorating the body of the Lord. As such, in the Paravyama, spiritual varieties are also distinguished from the material variegatedness. Paravyama means spiritual sky. Text 11. विभूषितं मे कलयाङ्गुलीयकैः महाधनैर्नूपुरकङ्कणादिभिः स्निग्धामलाकुञ्चितनीलकुन्तलैः विरोचमानाननहासपेशलम्. Is well decorated with an ornamental wreath garland about his waist and rings studded with valuable jewels on his fingers. His leglets, his bangles, his oiled hair curling with the bluish tint, and his beautiful smiling face are all very pleasing. The Supreme Personality of Godhead is the most beautiful person amongst all others, and Srila Shukadeva Goswami describes every part of his transcendental beauty, one after another, in order to teach the impersonalists that the personality of Godhead is not an imagination by the devotee for facility of worship. This is the standard method of uh, uh, interpretation by the impersonalists, that all these forms of meditation is just a facility for worship. Because you are incapable, this facility is provided by the Vedas. The impersonal feature of, but is a supreme person in fact and figure. The impersonal feature of the absolute truth is but his radiation, as the sun rays are but radiations from the sun. That is noted by Sridhar Swami on the basis of Harivamsha. There's something in the chat box. We see that some devotees wear gold. For them, Kali does not affect. Those who are liberated souls, for them it will not have an effect. For those who are not, it will have an effect. It depends on the degree to which one is advanced in consciousness. Text 12. Adina Leela Hasite Kshanol Sad Bhrubhanga Samsuchita Bhuryanugraham Iksheta Chinta Mayamena Mishwaram Yavan manodharana yavatishthate, the Lord's magnanimous pastimes and the glowing glancing of his smiling face are all indications of his extensive benediction. One must therefore concentrate on this transcendental form of the Lord as long as the mind can be fixed on him by meditation. Chintamayam means the Lord who reveals himself upon being meditated. Dayaiva Vidvan. As soon as one meditates, the Lord appears in the hearts of his exalted devotees. In the Bhagavad Gita 12.5, it is said that the impersonalist undergoes a series of difficult programs on account of his impersonal meditation. But the devotee, due to the Lord's personal service, progresses very easily. Impersonal meditation is therefore a source of suffering for the impersonalist. Here, the devotee has an advantage over the impersonalist philosopher. The impersonalist is doubtful about the personal feature of the Lord, and therefore he always tries to meditate upon something which is not objective. Thus, here is an authentic statement in the Bhagavatam regarding the positive concentration of the mind on the factual form of the Lord. That's the question here. We say that the Lord is so beautiful, but we see only from the materialistic point of view. Then what is the beauty we talk? This actually is brought out in Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur's commentary to the 10th canto in the prayers of the personified Vedas. So he takes up a text from Gopalatapani Upanishad for analysis. It is described that Lord Gopala is decorated with flower garlands. He has a peacock feather. He has the color of the monsoon cloud. He's very beautiful. So then he says, now factually speaking, the color of his, he's entirely transcendental. So his skin is also transcendental. So when we hear that the color of his skin is like that of a monsoon cloud, that monsoon cloud is also transcendental. So, but a sadhaka who is sitting here, when he meditates upon Lord Gopala in accordance with the statements of that Upanishad, what does he do? He has no experience of the transcendental monsoon cloud. So what he does, he looks at this cloud within his experience, and in his mind he creates a form of Lord Gopal, and he's meditating on that, and he's thinking that he's meditating on Lord Gopal. Factually speaking, he is not meditating on Lord Gopal. But when he is executing all the various items of devotional service correctly, the Supreme Lord becomes merciful. The Supreme Lord is on the other side of Brahmajyoti. He becomes merciful. So just as this devotee thinks that he is meditating on Lord Gopal on the other side, he counter things. He also thinks in response to this that yes, see, my pure devotee is meditating on me. I should bestow him the benefit of meditating upon me. And then it helps him come to his lotus feet by making him a perfect pure devotee. And after he attains perfection, then actually he is able to realize that Lord Gopal is so beautiful, because then he is able to perceive the monsoon cloud and so on of the spiritual world. So if we execute devotion service correctly, then we will be able to understand. All these scriptural descriptions are meant to be understood in the spirit. It is not the material beauty that we are talking about, but it is to give us an impetus to understand that he is much more beautiful than anything and everything we can imagine based on our material experience. That is the point. Therefore, we should execute pure devotional service unto him so that he will reveal himself. Sevo mukhehi jihvadau swayameva spuratyada. That is the point. Okay, let's move on. It is suggested herein that the meditative devotee should try to concentrate on the described form of the Lord as long as the mind can be fixed upon him. His smiling benedictions on the devotee are said to be extensive, and what to speak of his transcendental pastimes. To the neophytes, the great acharyas offered the same advantage by installing deities in the temples. The neophytes can then come to the temple and directly concentrate upon the Lord by looking at his deity form, Archamurti. This form of the Lord is equivalent to that described here by Srila Shukadev Goswami, who factually realized the Lord after hearing directly from his great father, Srila Vyasadeva. Temple worship is not idol worship as is misconceived by the less intelligent, because the deity is not a product of iconography. In other words, it's not through our imagination that we create a particular symbol through which we access the absolute truth. The deity in the temple is authentic because he is installed not according to imagination, but following the instructions of revealed scripture. Therefore, the iconoclast should not try to banish temple worship and risk turning society towards atheism. Iconoclast, the person who goes against all kinds of established methods of worship. Imitation worship, however, is not advantageous because it is a product of material imagination and is thus not equivalent to the meditation recommended here in Srimad Bhagavatam. The process of meditation recommended here is Bhakti Yoga, or the process of devotion service, after one is liberated from the material conditions. Jnana Yoga is the process of liberation from the material conditions. After one is liberated from the conditions of material existence, that is, when one is nivritta, as previously stated herein, or when one is freed from all material necessities, one becomes qualified to discharge the process of Bhakti Yoga. Therefore, Bhakti Yoga includes Jnana Yoga, or in other words, the process of pure devotion service simultaneously serves the purpose of Jnana Yoga. We should also note that pure devotional service to Krishna includes the Vairagya and Vidya of the yoga system, which includes the Vairagya and Vidya of the Jnana system, which also includes the Vairagya and Vidya of the Karma system. In the Karma platform also, there's a little bit of Vairagya and Vidya. Liberation from material conditions is automatically achieved by the gradual development of pure devotion service. These effects of Bhakti Yoga are called anartha nivritti. Things which are artificially acquired gradually disappear along with the progress of Bhakti Yoga. Meditation on the lotus feet of the personality of God is the first processional step, the first step in the process, must show its effect by anartha nivritti. The grossest type of anartha which binds the conditioned soul in material existence is sex desire, and this sex desire gradually develops in the union of the male and female. When the male and female are united, the sex desire is further aggravated by the accumulation of buildings, children, friends, relatives, and wealth. When all these are acquired, the conditioned soul becomes overwhelmed by such entanglements, and thus the false sense of egoism or the sense of myself and mine becomes prominent. And the sex desire expands to various political, social, altruistic, philanthropic, and many other unwanted engagements, resembling the foam of the sea waves, which becomes very prominent at one time and at the next moment vanishes as quickly as a cloud in the sky. This is a paraphrase of Pursastriya Mithumi Bhavam. This verse you'll come across in the 5th canto. The conditioned soul is encircled by such products of sex desire, and therefore Bhakti Yoga leads to gradual evaporation of sex desire, which is summarized in 3 headings, namely profit, adoration, and distinction. All conditioned souls are mad after these different forms of sex desire, and one shall see for himself how much he has been freed from such material hankerings based primarily on sex desire. As a person feels his hunger satisfied after eating each morsel of foodstuff, he must similarly be able to see the degree to which he is freed from sex desire. So you should first of all check. Gross sex desire is something that we know of very well. Then there is subtle sex desire, labha, puja, pratishtha. So when we sense that all of these are diminishing, then we understand we are progressing. When it is not diminishing, it means we are not progressing. And when it is increasing, it means we are regressing. Sex desire in its various forms is diminished by the process of Bhakti Yoga because Bhakti Yoga automatically, by the grace of the Lord, effectively results in knowledge and renunciation. Even if the devotee is not materially very well educated, knowledge means knowing things as they are. And if by deliberation it is found that there are things which are at all unnecessary, naturally the person who has acquired knowledge leaves aside such unwanted things. So there are things which are not required, and there are certainly things which may be required to a small extent. Yavadartha prayojanam. That's the principle. There are certain things which may be required, but you don't require it 24 hours a day. You may require it for 12 hours a day, 6 hours a day. So that is another consideration. When the conditioned soul finds by culture of knowledge that material necessities are unwanted things, he becomes detached from such unwanted things. This stage of knowledge is called vairagya, or detachment from unwanted things. We have previously discussed that the transcendentalist is required to be self-sufficient and should not beg from the rich blind persons to fulfill the bare necessities of life. Shukadeva Goswami has suggested some alternatives for the bare necessities of life, namely the problem of eating, sleeping, and shelter. But he has not suggested any alternative for sex satisfaction. One who has sex desires still with him should not at all try to accept the renounced order of life. For one who has not attained to this stage, there is no question of a renounced order of life. So, by the gradual process of devotional service, under the guidance of a proper spiritual master and following the principles of the Bhagavatam, one must be able at least to control the gross sex desire before one accepts the renounced order of life, actually. So, there is something called gross sex desire. And what we saw earlier, they are manifestations of subtle sex desire. So purification means getting free gradually from sex desire, and this is attained by meditation on the person of the Lord as described herein, beginning from the feet. One should not try to go upwards artificially without seeing for himself how much he has been released from sex desire. The smiling face of the Lord is the 10th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. And there are many upstarts who at once try to begin with the 10th canto, and especially with the 5 chapters which delineate the Rasalila of the Lord. This is certainly improper. By such improper study or hearing of the Bhagavatam, the material opportunists have played havoc by indulgence in sex life in the name of the Bhagavatam. This vilification of the Bhagavatam, this blasphemy of the Bhagavatam is rendered by the acts of the so-called devotees. One should be free from all kinds of sex desire before he tries to make a show of the recital of the Bhagavatam. Sri Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur clearly defines the import of purification as cessation from sex indulgence. He says, Yatha yatha dhischa shuddhyati vishayalampratyam tyajati tatha tatha dharayediti chitta shuddhi taratamye naiva dhyana taratamya muktam. This is actually going to come. Is it coming in the next? Yes, comes in 13. And as one gets free from the intoxication of sex indulgence, by purification of intelligence, the intoxication of sex indulgence, actually the 6 urges that we read in the nectar of instruction, it starts with the subtle to gross. Vacho vegam is the desire to communicate. Manasaha vegam, this is raga. Krodha vegam, this is dvesha. Then udara upastha, jihva udara upastha. So upastha vega is the grossest. And all of these are different forms of intoxication. Addiction. One should step forward for the next meditation, or in other words, the progress of meditation on the different limbs of the transcendental body of the Lord should be enhanced in proportion to the progress of purification of the heart. The conclusion is that those who are still entrapped by sex indulgence should never progress to meditation above the feet of the Lord. Therefore, recital of Srimad Bhagavatam by them should be restricted to the 1st and 2nd cantos of the great literature. Actually, at one time, Gopi Pranandu said that we should promote at least a study of the first two cantos of Srimad Bhagavatam amongst initiated devotees in ISKCON. One must complete the purificatory process by assimilating the contents of the first 9 cantos. Then one should be admitted into the realm of the 10th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. Okay, what is this? Puri Pandas eat fish and cook the bhoga for the Lord, we heard. Is it true? Maybe true. Can we have the prasadam later? I don't know. But Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur did mention something about this concept of people eating fish in Puri. Something, it comes in Bhaktisiddhanta-vaibhava. How will we see Lord Jagannath from the feet? Lord Jagannath will certainly have padukas. The padukas are considered to be extensions of the feet of the Supreme Lord. In fact, Vedanta Deshika wrote 1,000 Sanskrit verses in the middle of a night, just within the course of one night, on the padukas of Lord Ranganath, paduka sahasram. So, padukas are considered extensions of the lotus feet of the Lord. 13. Ekaikashongani dhyanu bhavaye padadi yavad dhasitam gada vritaha jitam jitam sthanam apohya dharaye param param shuddhyati dhir yatha yatha. The process of meditation should begin from the lotus feet of the Lord and progress to his smiling face. The meditation should be concentrated upon the lotus feet, then the calves, then the thighs, and in this way higher and higher. The more the mind becomes fixed upon the different parts of the limbs one after another, the more the intelligence becomes purified. Asyaiva dharanam, asyaiva dhyanamaha. Now he is talking about dhyana. Dharana, dhyana, and samadhi. This is step number 6. This is dhyana of the Antaryama. Super soul. Anubhavaye dhyaye. Yadyajjitam ayatnataha spuritam. Padagulphadi sthanam. Avayavaha tattat apohya tatva. Param param jangha janvadi dharaye dhyaye. Jitam jitam, gradually controlling the mind, indicates that effortlessly when the Lord's feet, calves, and so on are manifested, then one should progress in one's meditation. Shuddhyati, tasmin nishla bhavati. When the mind becomes pure, indicates that it is unshakenly fixed on the Lord. This meditation of the different parts of the transcendental body of the Lord, one to one or one after another, this is to become firmly fixed in the practice. Abhyase sati sarva avayava ekadapi dhyaye. When such practice is perfect, when one becomes firmly fixed in that practice, then at one time he is able to meditate on all the different, the entire body of the Lord. Yathaiva dhi shuddhyati. See, as one's intelligence becomes pure and pleased in a transcendental manner, athaiva dhyaya. In that manner, one should meditate. Tasyaiva dhyanamaha ekaikasha iti. Na nishchitam. Jitam jitam. Dhyanena abhyastam sthanam. So manah prayodhya grahye. one should actually utilize one's mind, use one's mind, and be fixed on the Lord. And then here is the portion that Prabhupada has quoted. Yatha yatha dhishcha shuddhyati. As to whatever extent the mind becomes pure, which means Vishaya Lampatyam Tyajati. It gives up the lust for sense objects, lust and greed for sense objects. Tatha tatha dharayat. To that extent, one should engage in meditation. Iti chitta shuddhi taratamye naiva dhyana taratamyo uttam. So, according to the gradation of the purification of the mind, there is a gradation of meditation. Tena atyanta ashuddha chittasya na atra adhikaraha. So those who are excessively impure in mind, they are not eligible into vairaja dharanayam eva iti vyanjita. But such people are only eligible to engage in dharana on the Virat Purusha. That is revealed here. The process of meditation recommended in the Srimad Bhagavatam is not to fix one's attention on something personal or void. The meditation should concentrate on the person of the Supreme Godhead, either in his Virat Rupa, the gigantic universal form, or in his Sachidananda Vigraha, as described in the scriptures. There are authorized descriptions of Vishnu forms, and there are authorized representations of deities in the temples. Thus, one can practice meditating upon the deity, concentrating his mind on the lotus feet of the Lord and gradually rising higher and higher up to his smiling face. According to the Bhagavata school, the Lord's rasa dancing is the smiling face of the Lord. This is all in that Padma Purana verse on the 12 cantos of Srimad Bhagavatam as being different parts of the Lord's body. The Lord's smiling face is described to be the 10th canto, and it is the Acharyas have separately noted that that smile of his exactly is his rasa dance. Since it is recommended in this verse that one should gradually progress from the lotus feet up to the smiling face, we shall not jump at once to understand the Lord's pastimes in the rasa dance. It is better to practice concentrating our attention by offering flowers and tulsi leaves to the lotus feet of the Lord. In this way, we gradually become purified by the archana process. We dress the Lord, bathe him, etc. And all these transcendental activities help us purify our existence. When we reach the higher standard of purification, if we see the smiling face of the Lord or hear the rasa dance pastimes of the Lord, then we can relish his activities. In the Srimad Bhagavatam, therefore, the rasa dance pastimes are delineated in the 10th canto, chapters 29 to 33. The more one concentrates on the transcendental form of the Lord, either on the lotus feet, the calves, the thighs, or the chest, the more one becomes purified. In this verse, it is clearly stated, the more the intelligence becomes purified, which means the more one becomes detached from sense gratification. Our intelligence in the present conditioned state of life is impure due to being engaged in sense gratification. The result of meditation on the transcendental form of the Lord will be manifested by one's detachment from sense gratification. Therefore, the ultimate purpose of meditation is purification of one's intelligence. Those who are too engrossed in sense gratification cannot be allowed to participate in archana or to touch the transcendental form of the Radha, Krishna, or Vishnu deities. For them, it is better to meditate upon the gigantic Virat Rupa of the Lord as recommended in the next verse. The impersonalists and the voidists are therefore recommended to meditate upon the universal form of the Lord, whereas the devotees are recommended to meditate on the deity worship in the temple. Because the impersonalists and the voidists are not sufficiently purified in their spiritual activities, archana is not meant for them. So, when one becomes sufficiently pure, then he does not need to follow the step-by-step method of meditation. He can meditate on the entire form of the Lord. That is indicated in Chaitanya Mahamanjusha also. Natra ekaika shoniyama. It is not that this is how one should go step by step. Always, which indicates that even after one attains the stage of complete anartha nivritti, 14 before that. So that means we should not go forward reading other cantos from canto 3 until we give up sex desire. One should certainly not meditate upon subject matters beyond the second canto. Actually, the way Prabhupada organized these 4 levels of study, Bhakti Shastri is for Brahmanas, Bhakti-vaibhava is for sannyasis or sannyas, Bhakti Vedanta is for Diksha Guru. The idea is that we should be ready to make spiritual progress as we go through um, these 4 levels of study of Prabhupada's books. We should be willing to go through the process, accept the austerities involved. Text 14. Yavan jayeta paravaresmin. See, we may study these, okay, but that doesn't mean that we start meditating on it. We may even come to the 10th canto and we'll be studying the Rasa Leela, but that doesn't mean that 24/7 we try to think about these things. We think about what we studied in the first 2 cantos. After we become pure, then we progress. Actually, that is a fact. Studying Srimad Bhagavatam is a form of meditation because it occupies our thought process. So therefore, it's very important that we engage in the study in a particular manner. It becomes easier when we study with the explanation provided by Prabhupada. Even for 10th canto, Prabhupada just provided the Krishna book. Text 14. Yavan jayet paravaresmin vishveshware drashtari bhakti yoga tavat sthaviya purushasya rupam kriyavasane prayatah smareta. Until the gross materialist develops a sense of loving service unto the Supreme Lord, the seer of both the transcendental and material worlds, he should remember or meditate upon the universal form of the Lord at the end of his prescribed duties. Purvokta Vairaja Dharanaya Eta Dharana Angatvam Aha. So the previous method of dharana on the Virat Rupa, that should be understood to be an aspect of this form of dharana. Bhakti Yoga Prema Lakshana. Here, Bhakti Yoga or devotional service refers to a sense of loving service unto the Lord. Priyavasani. Avashyaka Karmanusthana Anantaram. At the end of his prescribed duties means at the end of his mandatory prescribed duties. Anena karma api bhakti yoga paryantam eveti uttam. So from this we understand that one's duties of karma, they also extend up to bhakti yoga. Prayataha, niyama tatparaha. Prayataha, with proper attention. He should remember or meditate upon the universal form of the Lord at the end of his prescribed duties with proper attention. That indicates that one should be focused on carrying out the various rules and regulations. Chaitanya Manjusha says that as long as Bhakti Yoga does not arise, Bhakti Yoga focused on Lord Sri Krishna, who is the seer, who is the Lord of the universe, who is situated both in the transcendental and material worlds, one should remember the gross form described previously. Bhakti Yoga Sati. When one comes to the point of Bhakti Yoga, Tada tadrupa dhyana akinchit karam. Then this form of meditation on the gross Virat Rupa, that is considered to be insignificant. The Jiva Goswami says that Bhakti Yoga here refers to the uh, Abhinivesha, the absorbed meditation in the pathway of, in the sadhana described in the verses beginning with text 8. अतएव शुद्ध चित्तत्वात् एतद्रूपं यावत् ध्यातुं न शक्नुयात् तावत् वैराग्यरूपमेव ध्यायेत् इत्याह. Because of having an impure heart, as long as one is unable to meditate on this form, the form of the super soul, one should simply meditate on the Virat Rupa. Brahma and others are all inferior to him. That is the implication of the expression Paravari. Bhakti Yoga. Yoganga Bhutta Dhyana Lakshanaha. Here Bhakti Yoga refers to that form of meditation on the Supreme Lord that constitutes an aspect of yoga, Ashtanga Yoga. The Supreme Lord is the seer of all worlds, both material and transcendental. In other words, the Supreme Lord is the ultimate beneficiary and enjoyer of all worlds, as confirmed in the Bhagavad Gita 5.29. The spiritual world is a manifestation of his internal potency, and the material world is a manifestation of his external potency. The living entities are his marginal potency, and by their own choice, they can live in either the transcendental or material worlds. The material world is not a fit place for living entities because they are spiritually one with the Lord. And in the material world, the living entities become conditioned by the laws of the material world. The Lord wants all living entities who are his parts and parcels to live with him in the transcendental world. And for enlightening conditioned souls in the material world, all the Vedas and the revealed scriptures are there expressly to recall the conditioned souls back home, back to God. Unfortunately, the conditioned living entities, although suffering continually the threefold miseries of conditioned life, are not very serious about going back to God. It is due to their misguided way of living, complicated by sins and virtues. Some of them who are virtuous by deeds begin to re-establish the lost relation with the Lord, but they are unable to understand the personal feature of the Lord. The real purpose of life is to make contact with the Lord and be engaged in his service. That is a natural position of living entities. But those who are impersonalists and are unable to render any loving service to the Lord, I have been advised to meditate upon his impersonal feature, the Virat Rupa, or universal form. Some way or other, one must try to, I think that the meditate upon his impersonal feature or the Virat Rupa or universal form. That was, I think, an editorial slip. Some way or other, one must try to re-establish one's forgotten relation with the Lord if one at all desires to gain real happiness in life and to reclaim his natural, unfettered condition. Unfettered means unbound condition. For the less intelligent beginners, meditation on the impersonal feature, the Virat Rupa, in which case, his impersonal feature, the Virat Rupa or universal form is correct only. Meditation on the impersonal feature, the Virat Rupa or universal form of the Lord will gradually qualify one to rise to personal contact. The universal form is at least partially impersonal. There are a number of people who honor the universal form more than the personal form of the Lord. So it is not fully personal. In that sense, it can be described as impersonal. One is advised herewith upon the Virat Rupa specified in the previous chapter in order to understand how the different planets, seas, mountains, rivers, birds, beasts, human beings, demigods, and all that we can conceive are but different parts, limbs of the Lord's Virat form. This sort of thinking is also a type of meditation on the absolute truth. And as soon as such meditation begins, one develops one's godly qualities. And the whole world appears to be a happy and peaceful residence for all the people of the world. Without such meditation on God, either personal or impersonal, all good qualities of the human being become covered with misconceptions regarding his constitutional position. And without such advanced knowledge, the whole world becomes a hell for the human being. Meditation on Virat Rupa looks difficult as it is imaginary form. It is imaginary only in the sense that it is not found in the spiritual world of Vaikuntha. That is all. It is a method of meditation. Sthiram sukham cha sanamastito yatir yada jihasu rimamanga lokam kale cha deshe cha manona sajjaye pranam niyacchen manasajita suku. O king, whenever the yogi desires to leave this planet of human beings, he should not be perplexed about the proper time or place, but should comfortably sit without being disturbed, and regulating the life air should control the senses by the mind. Into a scripture called Shadgunya, in which it is stated that one controls his prana, his life airs, by engagement in bhakti, devotion service to Lord Vishnu. Evam tavat asanna mrityoho pumsaha krityam uktam. So the duty of a man who is about to die has been stated. Idanim tasyaiva swayam deham tyaktum icchataha krityamaha. Now, the duty of a person who personally wishes to give up his body is stated. Sthiramiti sardhaish chaturbhi. In 4.5 verses, beginning with sthiram, that is, beginning with text 15. So when such a yati, such a sannyasi, decides to give up his body, one should not become emotionally attached to a particular punya kshetra, pious place, or a pious time such as Uttarayana. Nahi deshakalo yogina siddhi hetu, because place and time are not the causes of the perfection of a yogi. Into yoga eva iti dhridanishya bhutva, because he should be firmly convinced that it is yoga itself which is the cause of the perfection of the yoga system. So, with that firm conviction, he should comfortably sit without being disturbed and regulating the life air. He should control the senses by the mind. To desire bhakti yoga, then and one can give up one's body as one wishes. Then Parikshit, who is very soon about to die, he should simply be engaged in this anudhyana, continuous meditation. He will give up his body as he desires. Anantaram, पूर्ववच्च यदि महत्कृपा विशेषेण दिव्य दृष्टिता भवति तदा विशेष उपलब्धिश्च भवेत् न चेत् निर्विशेष चिन्मात्र ब्रह्मानुभवेन तल्लीन एव भवति तथैव निदिध्यासनमपि तेषाम्. And then if, like stated before, if one develops divine vision by the special mercy of the great souls, then he is able to realize the variegatedness, spiritual variegatedness. Otherwise, by experience of the impersonal Brahman, one simply becomes absorbed in him, in that Brahman existence. That itself is nididhyasana, intense meditation for them. अथ तस्यैव भक्तिमिश्र योगिनः स्वयं देहत्याग कृत्यमाः. For those engaged in Bhakti Mishra Yoga, the duty of giving up one's own body by one's own wish is now stated. Bhakti Mishra Yoga means yoga is predominant, bhakti is subordinate. Yoga Mishra Bhakti means bhakti is predominant, yoga is subordinate. This is Bhakti Mishra Yoga. In the Bhagavad Gita 8.14, it is clearly stated that a person who is totally engaged in the transcendental loving service of the Lord and who constantly remembers him at every step easily obtains the mercy of the Lord by entering into his personal contact. Such devotees do not need to seek an opportune moment to leave the present body, but those who are mixed devotees, alloyed with fruitive action or empiric philosophical speculation, require an opportune moment for quitting this body. For them, the opportune moments are stated in the Bhagavad Gita 8.23 to 26. But these opportune moments are not as important as once being a successful yogi who is able to quit his body as he likes. Such a yogi must be competent to control his senses by the mind. The mind is easily conquered simply by engaging it at the lotus feet of the Lord. Gradually, by such service, all the senses become automatically engaged in the service of the Lord. That is the way of merging into the Supreme Absolute. 16. Manasvabuddhya malayani kshetrajya etam nirnayet tamatmani atmanam atman avaruddhya dhiro labdhopashantir virameta krityat. Thereafter, the yogi should merge his mind by his unalloyed intelligence into the living entity and then merge the living entity into the super self. And by doing this, the fully satisfied living entity becomes situated in the supreme stage of satisfaction so that he ceases from all other activities. Madhvacharya interprets the word Kshetrajya as referring to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Lord Vishnu, who is situated in the Jivatma. And he quotes the Tattva Nirnaya as evidence. He is also referred to as Atma. Atma also means one who is all-pervasive. Okay, this merging simply means that Ekatvena Vichintya. This merging means when it says and then merge the living entity into the super self, it means then one should contemplate that the living entity is one with the super self. Labdho Prapta Nivritti. The idea is that in the first stage of spiritual progress, one attempts to come to the point of Atma, Anatma, Vaidharmya Anubhava. One wants to experience the distinction between the conscious being and matter. There are three entities, Atma, Anatma, and Paramatma. So that That is what we refer to as self-realization, first stage of self-realization, when we realize we are not the subtle body or the gross body. Then the next stage, and in fact, the perfection of the karma system is that it can bring you to this point through anartha nivritti or chitta shuddhi. That is all. But the next stage is Atma Paramatma Sadharmya Anubhav. To realize that the soul and the super soul are one in quality. This is the impersonal method of meditation. Then higher than this is Atma Paramatma Vaidharmya Anubhav. To realize the distinction between the soul and the supreme soul. So there are different stages. In Ramanujacharya's explanation to the first 6 chapters of Bhagavad Gita also, we notice this kind of progress. That's when finally one comes to Yoginam api sarvesham adgatena antaratmana shraddhavan bhajate yomam same yukta tamo mataha. That is the final stage. The functions of the mind are thinking, feeling, and willing. When the mind is materialistic or absorbed in material contact, it acts for material advancement of knowledge, destructively ending in discovery of nuclear weapons. But when the mind acts under the spiritual urge, it acts wonderfully for going back home, back to Godhead, for life and complete bliss and eternity. Therefore, the mind has to be manipulated by good and unalloyed intelligence. Perfect intelligence is to render service unto the Lord. One should be intelligent enough to understand that the living being is, in all circumstances, a servant of the circumstances. Every living being is serving the dictates of desire, anger, lust, illusion, insanity, and enviousness, all materially affected. See, the Prabhupada often brings up this concept that we are serving these different dictates or different urges. And people instinctively know this. For instance, there are people who know that they are addicted to drinking and who want to get out of it. And when they do something wrong, they apologize and saying, I'm sorry, it is not me, it is my drinking. And it is my drinking habit which has taken over me. I've become a slave to the urge to drink and therefore I'm unable to get out of it. So they try actually to, they recognize that they are being enslaved by these urges. But even while executing such dictations of different temperaments, he's perpetually unhappy. When one actually feels this and turns his intelligence to inquiring about it from the right sources, he gets information of the transcendental loving service of the Lord. Instead of serving materially for the above-mentioned different humors of the body, the living entity's intelligence then becomes freed from the unhappy illusion of materialistic temperament, and thus by unalloyed intelligence, the mind is brought into the service of the Lord. The Lord and his service are identical, being on the absolute plane. Therefore, the unalloyed intelligence and the mind are merged into the Lord. And thus the living entity does not remain a seer himself, but becomes seen by the Lord transcendently. When the living entity is directly seen by the Lord dictates to him to act according to his desire. And when the living entity follows him perfectly, the living entity ceases to discharge any other duty for his illusory satisfaction. In his pure unalloyed state, the living being attains the stage of full bliss, labdhopashanti, and ceases all material anchorings. Labdhopashanti, yes, labdhopashanti. One who attains full bliss. Okay, there's a question here. Prabhupada is mentioning mind is easily controlled by meditating on the lotus feet of the Lord. But I feel it is not so easy. Now, when one meditates on the lotus feet of the Lord, it is easy. Meditation, dhyana, or even dharana. It's not simply thinking, it's dharana. Before that, there are stages. Yama, niyama, asana, pranayama, pratyahara, dharana, dhyana, samadhi, dharana. So when we are focused and we meditate on the lotus feet of the Lord, we stop other things, meditate on the Lord's lotus feet. Then the mind is easily controlled. In Bhagavad Gita also we come across abhyasena tu kaunteya vairagyena chidrikyate. The mind is controlled through abhyasa and vairagya. Abhyasa refers to repeated practice, authorized practice. Vairagya refers to giving up, actually abandoning, parityaga, giving up things which are distracting. So when that happens, then the mind is controlled. Then one is able to uh, go on with that. How much time? That is up to each and every one of us. Whenever Prabhupada was asked this question, how much time does it take to go back to Godhead? His typical answer was always, even within one moment, you can attain it. How much time one should meditate? 24/7. But because we are not able to do, we are given all different types of activities which prompt us to think about Krishna. I'm still convinced that the central feature of Bhakti Yoga, as taught by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and as demonstrated by Haridas Thakur, is that we should increase the quality and quantity of the chanting of the Maha Mantra. Most important, convinced of this. But I think that even though we are sincerely trying to attempt devotional service in so many ways, because we are not doing this one thing, therefore we are suffering so much. Achyutanam Prabhu. Haribol, you cannot hear. Why I cannot hear? Can anyone hear?
We are also not able to hear him.
Nobody is able to hear. Trying to engage in devotion service by so many ways means we should what all of us can do is we can look at, for instance, the 64 items of devotional service. Now, for uh, different individuals, different items or different combinations of particular items may absorb the mind in Krishna's name, form, qualities, pastimes. So that is something we individually have to work it out. Achyutanam Prabhu's question we cannot hear. Okay. Either you write the question or you ask in the Telegram group through a voice message. Okay. So we'll stop with that. Vanchakalpatarubhyascha kripasinduhye vacha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha.